some of the new models that we're talking about are one I don't like, which is called 360, and I'll explain that in a moment. Another one is ad revenue sharing. Another one is, excuse me, another one is giving away your product and hoping people will come to your concerts. Let me talk about the 360 a moment. 360 is coming along on several levels. Recently, everybody's seen the publicity concerning the Madonna 360. What is 360? 360 is the record company or the company, we won't call it the record company for a moment, the company and the artist will share in all aspects of the artist's career. Means record sales, concert tours, merchandising, publishing, all aspects, all potential income. That's what 360 seems to mean at this particular point. Now, for somebody like Madonna, in which they're paying, reportedly in the trades, a lot of money, something in excess of $120 million, if that's true, for all these aspects, that sounds like a good deal for her. I don't know her finances. I don't know the company's finances, but it sounds like a terrific deal. So she gives them all her services. She pockets big checks, and her future seems to be secure. If it wasn't really already secure, it seems to be that it was. But what the record companies are doing with new acts are trying to do the same thing, but in a much less way. And let me explain that. The record companies, when they've signed an artist in the past, they sign them for their record rights. They have went ahead and then they exploited the records. They marketed it, they promoted it, they sold the records, and they paid the artist a royalty. They paid the publisher a royalty, they paid the artist a royalty, and they took their income and they made their profits from that. Did 10 out of 10 artists succeed that they signed? No. Maybe 1 out of 10, maybe 1 out of 20 artists succeeded, but the ones who succeeded at such a level that the record companies were able to make lots of money out of the ones that succeeded to pay for all of the ones that didn't succeed. Now they say, well, why didn't they? The next question is, well, why didn't they sign more acts that would succeed? Well, there's not many geniuses in our business. I don't know of any genius in a business that can pick 10 out of 10. A genius is somebody who picks 1 or 2 out of 10. Not 10 out of 10, because you don't know ultimately what the public will respond to. And you also don't know early on if this is an artist, even though they failed early, whether they'll succeed later. So philosophies change. An example of that is, I think it took Bruce Springsteen, 3 albums to succeed. A number of other artists of that nature, Steely Dan, it took several albums for them to succeed. The companies believed in it, they stayed with it, and ultimately they succeeded. Today, the philosophy is if they don't succeed on the first album or the first couple weeks of the new album, they drop it. So they don't know whether they have a viable artist or not, because they're not staying with it long enough. And that's a bad thing. Back to where I was on the 360 aspect of it. So the record companies made their money from the sale of records. So now they see the sales of records have gone down. So their way of making up for it is, instead of thinking through the business model and finding better ways to market and promote and to protect their product, they say, oh, we'll take other pieces of the artist. Now, that's not a business model in my estimation. That you take a young artist and you say, well, now we're going to take your touring, we're going to take your merchandising, we're going to take your publishing, in addition to your record rights. Does that mean that the record companies will now succeed because they're grabbing all these other pieces? No, I don't think so. And I don't think that that is a substitute for the record companies finding a business model that works. Now, in addition to the fact, this is where I was going, in addition to the fact that the record companies seem to be unprepared for Sean Fanning, and Napster when it came along, and unprepared for the digital age, and were very slow to react. They also were companies that were completely transformed from sole proprietorships to corporate monoliths. Now, the result of that was as follows. At one time, you had Herbie Alpert and Jerry Moss, who had A&M Records, and you had David Geffen, who had Geffen Records, and you had Ahmet Ertegun, who had Atlantic Records, and you had Dave Kapp, who had Kapp Records, and you had endless number of these, Johnny Mercer, who formed Capitol Records. All these were started by entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs who had an ear for talent, and they went out and they discovered, they nurtured this talent, and they ran these companies to a degree by the seat of the pants. If they believed in an artist, they signed the artist. If they believed that that artist would succeed ultimately, even though the first album or two albums failed, they would stay with it because they believed in it, and they rode with it. Now, as the major corporations came in and started buying up all of these entrepreneurs, they bought up A&M Records, they bought Geffen Records, they bought Atlantic Records, they just on and on. They bought, I can't remember, Seymour Stein's company, I forgot the name of that company, the one who discovered Madonna. They bought one of these companies after another. Now, in order to buy these companies and pay $500 million or $600 million or $700, whatever the sums were that they were paying for all these vibrant companies, they had to borrow money. In order to borrow money, when they borrowed money, they had debt service. They had to pay off debts to accomplish this. In order to pay off debts, they started firing the people that they bought. The very talented people, the very great A&R and talent discovery people, they started firing these people. So instead of it having a positive effect, it was having a negative effect. So now less great talent was being discovered and signed. The companies were cutting down on their marketing and promotion. And so they were hurting themselves while they were expanding. And so when you combine that aspect of it, the corporate debt that was imposed on these companies, with the unpreparedness for the digital age, that's almost the perfect storm for a disaster in our industry. And that's what's happened. And that's why we find ourselves where we are today, or that's where we find ourselves today. And that's why this is the most major upheaval in our industry that I've ever seen. And I don't know how we're going to get out of it. It's not going to be easy.